Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem. Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio. Dennis Graf here with Kasper Roslowski. It's the 16th of October, and it's good to be back, Cass. I mean, we were supposed to do a breakdown episode last week. Unfortunately, I had some personal issues, some health issues with some family members, but now everything's back in order. We missed out on talking about UFC 204, but I think we're going to make up for it this week.
We will. We'll be covering UFC 204 and a bunch of other things. Oh man, it's good to be back, and we've got a bunch of incredibly sexy guests this week joining us on this fine episode of Submission Radio. You want to know what they are? We've got Joanna Jedrzejczyk, the UFC strawweight champion. She's going to be fighting Karolina Kowalkiewicz at UFC 205. Joanna's on the show, makes a long-awaited return. Luke Rockhold is coming back to the show. This is like the show of the returns. People we haven't had for a while, but have been dying to have him on. Luke Rockhold, obviously fighting Jacare Souza. A lot to talk to Luke about. Obviously his fight, the Michael Bisping, Dan Henderson fight. So he's going to be back on the show. And then Dillon Danis, a Submission Radio first. Never had him on the show. He's, of course, Conor McGregor's training partner and BJJ coach. So he's going to be on the program. A lot of questions for that man as well. And then Damon Martin of Fox Sports returns to talk about, well, a whole bunch of things. We're going to be covering UFC 204, more specifically Bisping versus Henderson and who exactly we think won that fight. What's next for the middleweight division? Ronda Rousey versus Amanda Nunes just got announced. So we're going to be discussing that, if it's fair, if Ronda should have gotten the title shot, Chris Cyborg, where this leaves her, if she should have been fighting Chris Cyborg, and then of course Juliana Pena, voicing her displeasure. We're going to be covering that and if this is the trend. Oh, and Conor McGregor got a whopping $150,000 fine courtesy of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, so we'll be discussing that as well. All those things with Damon Martin. So it is a fat, stacked, and juicy episode. Joanna first, then Dillon Danis, then Luke Rockhold, and then Damon Martin.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's great to be back. Great to have all these guys on. I can't wait to speak to the guests this week. And guys, if you still haven't had an opportunity, jump on Twitter, follow us on Twitter at SubmissionAUS, jump on Facebook, give us a like. That's facebook.com/SubmissionRadioAUS. And there's some merchandise that you can pick up. If you still haven't checked it out, make sure to do it. There's a description in the link below if you're looking on YouTube. You can check it out on our website as well. The link is there as well. Check out, get some Submission Radio merch, get some swag, put it on, tweet out a picture, we'll retweet it. We like to see our listeners wearing our merch, so it'll be a lot of fun. And also, we're going to be over in New York, UFC 205, so if you want to rep Submission Radio, wear the Submission Radio t-shirt. Maybe we'll see you at one of the media events. Imagine that, Cass, a Submission Radio person in the crowd. That would be a lot of fun too. So, without further ado, I'm going to jump to the first guest. Cass, you're almost ready to introduce him, but before you do, just a quick reminder to everybody who doesn't listen to the end of the program, next week there will be no episode. It's not because of any family matters, it's just because it was planned all along. There's a big row of shows happening towards UFC 205 and UFC Melbourne. There's a couple of things we need to do to prepare ourselves. There's a few things we need to do behind the scenes. So there won't be a show next week, but we'll be back the following week and the weeks after that, obviously leading into UFC 205, which we'll be there for, and UFC Melbourne as well. So a lot of content happening. But without further ado, first guest is on the line. Cass, I believe you're about to introduce her.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a six-time Muay Thai world champion and the current undefeated UFC strawweight champion. She'll be taking on Karolina Kowalkiewicz at the incredibly stacked UFC 205 in November 12th at Madison Square Garden in New York. Joanna Jedrzejczyk, welcome back to Submission Radio. How's it going today?
Hi, guys. I'm doing very well. Good to hear you.
Well, it's good to hear you as well, and good to have you back on the program after such a long time. And it's a tradition that we start this interview by asking you about your sneaker collection. Last time we spoke to you, you guessed that you had maybe about 60 pairs of kicks. How many do you think you have now?
I don't know. I gave so many to my friends, to my fans, so I don't know. It might be the same amount or maybe more. But I've got today the special Iverson, the questions, the red one. So tomorrow I will do some post about, but are very sick, and I for sure are gonna wear them for the media day in New York.
Nice.
Are so special. and I will keep them for special occasion. Yeah.
It's good to hear that you're giving them away to your fans and friends. I mean, ours obviously must have gotten lost in the mail.
Yes, I do. I like to share. Like it's enough for everyone.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, over the years, how much money do you think obviously you get a lot of them for free these days from Reebok, but how much money do you think you've spent over the years on kicks in your collection?
I think I could get some car for this,
Wow.
But, I'm not smoking, I'm not using drugs, I'm not drinking at all. I like red wine, but, I'm good, It's good that I have, like, healthy hobby and addiction, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever line up? We know that when a new shoe is released, some people camp overnight outside the store waiting for it to open to be one of the people to get it. Do you have any stories?
I don't have to. Sometimes I just, I'm very good friend with one of the owners of the sneaker stores in Poland. He's from my city, but he built like a big company. He has like so many stores in whole Poland, So sometimes I call him and he's like, yeah, I might get one pair for you. So it's like, I'm good to go,
Nice.
It's good to having those people.
You've got a sneaker guy. We've joked in the past, well, actually, you've told us in the past how you've literally got enough to sometimes you change them throughout the day. Just curious, how many pairs do you think you'll bring just to New York?
I don't know. I moved to Florida 4 weeks ago, and I brought just probably 4 pairs. So I've got few, but probably I will bring like 4 or 5 pairs of kicks. I will see, because after New York, 2 days after my fight, I will fly to Argentina. So I can get too much,
What are you doing in Argentina? Just got to ask.
I will shoot some TV program. It's going to be TV. It's going to be TV from Poland, so I might stay there for 4 weeks.
Mm.
Oh wow! Well, that sounds
it's going to be big. Like I must keep quiet about, but the thing is, it's going to be really huge TV program, which is in Poland, but amazing. I'm going to have so much fun, so I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe you could be the next big movie star to be coming out of the UFC. Let's quickly talk about UFC.
Like
yeah, that would be good. And I mean, we'll have to get a translator so we can watch this Polish show when you do it, because, well, Casper speaks Polish, so he can just translate it to me. Let's talk about UFC 205. You're fighting against Carolina. It was a bit of a late surprise announcement. When did the UFC first speak to you about fighting on the card?
You know what? I wanted to fight on this show so badly. When I heard about UFC coming to New York, I was like, Dana, please put me on this card. I was like, I really wanted to fight so badly on this card, not just because of the magical place, which is Madison Square Garden, not just because of it's going to be the first UFC show in New York, but like you heard, I have so many plans for the rest of this year, so it's just perfect date for me. But the thing is, it's going to be epic show, like it was in Australia, it was big show, huge show, amazing show. And I want to be part of the biggest UFC shows. I want to be part of the biggest things in my life. So it was the reason, So I spoke to Dana August 1st. So it was just three weeks after my fight with Claudia Gadelha. But the thing was that Dana said that they wanted me to fight in Poland. They wanted to make a UFC show in Poland, and they wanted me to face Carolina in Poland. But I was like, Dana, please, I want to fight. I want to fight in New York, and he did that, and I'm so thankful to him, because I know that so many fighters wanted to be on this card.
Yeah, I mean, your fight with Carolina kind of seemed like it was last minute. It kind of made the switch to go on you. When did they confirm this to you?
I heard about like a week before the press conference, because I've been talking to Dana a few times, to Sean Shelby, and I was like, okay, if they're not gonna put me on this card, I just want to know when I'm going to fight again, because I want to get ready. I have like so many plans for the rest of the year, but the most important is always training and fighting for me. So but But yeah, finally I'm fighting on 205 at Madison Square Garden.
Well, let's talk about that press conference. I mean, it was a pretty epic press conference for a lot of reasons, and you and Carolina squared off, and you're, of course, known for your intense stare-downs. What did you see when you looked into her eyes?
You know, like, I know Carolina for a long time already. We fought in 2012. It was a amateur fight, which I won. But the thing is, like, before my fight with Claudia Gadelha, we've been shooting some commercial for one of our sponsors. So the thing is, like, we have had kind of good relation, but we still having a good relation, you know. But there is some limit, you know. When I'm in the preparations. When I'm coming through the fight to the octagon, there is no more time to play around, you know. I'm focused. I'm on beast mode on, you know. So that's the thing. But she's tough. This fight is going to be a really, really big fight, you know. So she beats Rose Namajunas in her last fight. So yeah, she's a tough opponent, but she said that she has a good plan for me. She said that Gadelha didn't have this plan, but the thing is, like, we all are having some plans until the first punch. All of my opponents, they have had some plans. They had some plans. Carolina has some plan for our upcoming fight, but the thing is, like, I'm different fighter. I'm really tough fighter, and in the night of the fight, I'm like, you know, I'm like the person from the hell, you know. So until the first punch, she might have some game plan, but after that, not anymore.
The fact that you beat her already with the choke, do you think that'll sort of play on her mind in the fight?
Probably not. It was like 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago. So it was mine and her first amateur fight, first MMA fight. So probably not. She did like big step in her fighting career, you know. She became a UFC fighter. She's 3-0 in the UFC. So she's doing pretty well. She's like very tough physically and mentally, and her cardio is on point. So I think, like I said, it's going to be really, really good fight.
You gave Claudia her first professional loss. Carolina is also undefeated, as you just mentioned, as a professional. Do you like fighting undefeated fighters, and do you look forward to being the first one to beat them?
Sure, but when I was undefeated, like when I was like underdog, I like that, you know, because I was like, okay, I'm going to prove you that you're wrong. I'm going to be undefeated, you know. I'm going to still undefeated champion, and it's my goal. It's my dream to be being. I want to be undefeated champion, and I want to retire as undefeated champion, and it's my goal, and it's keep on going.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, most fighters that you'd find yourself against in the strawweight division, you'd end up being the favorite. Just wondering, you've spoken about Carolina before, and you've said that you're not really impressed with her. Is there anyone in the division that impresses you?
You know what? Like, I heard so many times that the strawweight division is the smallest division. There is no power. There is not a good fighters at all. But isn't true? This division is very young, but this division is very big. You know, probably in this division is more fighters than in bantamweight division. Like, I have like my eyes open. And I'm very focused, very humble, and I'm trying to stay calm and keep on training very hard every day, because I know that there is so many good fighters who are in this division in the UFC, or who will get into the UFC, and I must be really careful, and I must be even more serious than I was before, you know. So every camp, every fight is more difficult because of that, because I know that there is so many girls who wants to fight for this title, who want to take this belt away from me, you know, and I can't let them do this, you know.
Let me ask you this, because I was going to say, you mentioned the bantamweight division as well, and obviously your division. A while ago, when people looked at UFC 205 in New York, they thought, you know what, the women need to be showcased in a huge role. And a lot of people thought that Ronda Rousey was going to be playing that role. Of course, that's no longer happening. How do you feel that you are sort of going to be that person, and you're going to be center stage, and you're going to be, representing not just the bantamweight, the strawweight division, but all of sort of women's MMA in that sense on this massive card?
I'm happy. I'm very happy that I'm still undefeated. But hard work pays off, and that's the thing. Like, and I wish I'm gonna stay undefeated. When I walked through the octagon in the night of the fight, I visualize my victory. I'm very confident, but it's a sport. MMA is very beautiful sport, but very brutal sport as well. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but we must keep on going. So my main thing is like, go there and put on good fight, give everything what I have, and what I've been working for. So that's the thing. But I'm like, maybe I am a role model for some young girls, and I'm very happy about, but I'm trying to stay humble and focused and patient about, But Ronda, she's back very soon. She will be back.
Yeah, there's a lot of people sort of saying whether or not she deserves the title shot after losing to Holly Holm in her last fight.
She deserves it. Of course. I'm training with Amanda Nunes, and I respect her so much. But I have very good relation with Ronda Rousey. We had this relation for such a long time, so it's going to be a really good fight, because Amanda, she is a tough chick. Her boxing is on point. Her jiu-jitsu game is very good, but there is lots of pressure on Ronda, and she used to be like simply the best. She used to be one of the greatest, not just female, but the greatest MMA fighters. And she did so much for us, not just for female fighters, but for all of the MMA fighters, for the UFC. So we should be thankful for her for that. Like, I'm not gonna agree with Juliana Pena, who is complaining about that Ronda got the chance to fight for a title. I think she deserved that, and we should agree with that 100%.
Yeah, I mean, there is a debate, but no doubt Ronda Rousey did a huge amount for women's MMA. I'm just wondering, Amanda Nunes, obviously your new training partner in ATT, she is on the run of her career. She's the champion. How do you think this fight plays out? How do you think she's going to be able to stay the champion against Ronda?
Honestly, I don't train with Amanda. Like, okay, we see each other almost every day. Sometimes we join the same classes, but we don't train. She's very, very strong. She's like very, very strong, and she's very good athlete. But I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. The Ronda is a big question for us right now. Yeah, but I believe in her so badly, and I think it's going to be the toughest Ronda who we ever saw.
Well, let's talk about American Top Team, because you mentioned how you moved to Florida and how you see Amanda Nunes around. It's a switch up for you. It's a new camp. It's a new gym. Tell us, what's it like training there? And also, Valerie's obviously from ATT as well. Has that been a bit awkward training around her? And what's the relationship like there?
I feel free, I believe I can fly right now, and I'm really I feel I feel free. And the thing is, like, first few days were like hard for me, for those girls, for Valerie, Tisha Torres, and other fighters. They were like, "Oh, what's Joanna is doing here?" What Joanna is doing here. But they all thought that I came just for one day, for a few days, just check them out. But isn't true. I changed my coaches. I changed my gym. I moved to Florida to American Top Team because I think it's one of the greatest gyms in the world. I'm working with Mikey Brown, Cami, Cattell, and I feel like I have very, very good coaches, good people around me. My nutritionist and my doctor is from here, Michelle, Paulina, perfecting athletes. They are taking very good care of me. So it's the right place to be, you know. Like I said, I want to build myself more in the US, and that's why I had to do this move. And changes are very difficult. We are afraid of changes, but in the end, it's always good.
All right, Joanna. Well, we could chat to you all day, but we've essentially run out of time. So before we let you go, we got to ask, I know you're not big on predictions, but if you visualize the fight, is there any particular way that you see it going? And please don't say you'll have to tune in, because we're all going to be tuning on November 12th anyway.
I will mix, be like little bit of fight with Jessica Penne, and she gonna get enough because of the punches and kicks to the head, and then there will be more from the fight with Carla Esparza, so she will try to take me down because of enough of the punches, and then I will finish her on the ground, maximum third round.
Maximum third round. I love it. This is probably the most in-depth prediction you've ever given, so we really appreciate that, Joanna. Guys,
Yes.
The fight is November 12th. It's UFC 205. It's going to be New
This fight is very big for me. There is I don't want to just win. I want to win so badly. Even more than with Claudia Gadelha.
Wow, this is a scary, hungry Joanna Jedrzejczyk coming in. Don't forget to follow her on Twitter. The Twitter handle is nice and easy. It's Joanna MMA. She's, of course, going to be fighting Karolina Kowalkiewicz.
But Instagram and Facebook is Joanna Jedrzejczyk.
Yeah, so you're going to have to work a little bit harder if you want to find that one. But a quick Google search of Joanna MMA and everything is at your fingertips.
Yeah.
So don't forget to follow her. Joanna, we always appreciate you having you on the show. Thank you so much
Guys,
for taking the time.
thank you so much. Australian fans, I will be back to Australia. I love you so much.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest will be making a Submission Radio debut, a BJJ black belt under Marcelo Garcia, coming off a fresh win, getting double gold in the IBJJF Nogi Pan Am. He is now preparing Conor McGregor for his blockbuster fight at UFC 205. It's a pleasure to welcome Dillon Danis to Submission Radio. May I add, live from Ireland. Dillon, welcome to the program.
Thank you, man. Glad to be on here. Thanks for having me.
It is great to have you. Now, let's talk about this big win at the Pan Ams first. You got big win in the medium heavyweight division and a submission in your weight category and 2 submissions in the absolute division. Now, you've admitted to sort of performing below expectations at the Copa Podio Middleweight Grand Prix. This is your first tournament back since helping Conor for UFC 202. What exactly went different in your preparations for this comp?
I wouldn't say anything was too much different, but, I would say that my mental was definitely better for this one. The last one, I don't know. I had a little bit of lapse, or I just didn't perform well. The preparation wasn't correct. But for this one, I made sure that I was going to go out there and be like my old self and take care of it. So I was really happy with the last performance I had at the Pan Ams. I submitted to everybody except for one man. So there was nothing really that went wrong the last one. It was just I performed bad. I don't make excuses. I never have and I never will. So I just came back and got the job done. So that's all that matters.
I guess the big question here is, when you're preparing a guy like Conor McGregor for a fight, how much time do you have to focus on improving your BJJ game, and how hard has it been for you to balance life as a trainer and competitor?
Yeah, so the thing about me and Conor is that he respects me a lot and I respect him a lot, and we know what each other need. So we're both competitors in our prime right now, competing, and he knows that. So he lets me kind of train whatever I need to train, and I help him whatever he needs to train. So it's a really good relationship because we both respect each other and we're both good friends, and we just kind of there for each other. So the relationship is good. So training for my fights is easy, and him training for his fights are easy. We have each other's back, and that's all that matters.
That's awesome. And obviously MMA fans have, it's great that you're obviously getting this exposure and a whole new demographic. MMA fans now know, Dillon Danis and not just the, BJJ community. And obviously MMA fans have wanted to see you make the jump over to the sport for a while now. We all saw there was a bit of talk between you and Nate Diaz a while back, but how soon do you think we could, see you make the jump?
It could be soon. I mean, if the UFC offered me that fight, I would do it. So that's a possibility, If that big fight came, I would take it 100%. But I do have my goals I have to accomplish in jiu-jitsu, so it's very tricky for me. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. If I'm going to jump over or not. But if that UFC asked me for that fight, I would take it in a heartbeat. So that's definitely something that could be possible. But it could be tomorrow. It could be a year. I don't know. I mean, I have a good team around me that I like to, make sure I do it right. So. Yeah, it's just a matter of timing. I mean, it's definitely going to happen, though. There's no doubt about it. 100% it's going to happen. It's just a matter of timing right now.
Wow. I mean, it's one thing sort of if the UFC came to you, but I'm wondering if you've sort of gone to them. We saw, I believe it was on Instagram, you put up a post and you tagged Dana White. Have you gone and actually spoke to anyone in the UFC about actually doing this?
I mean, I haven't talked to anybody yet, but I mean, I'm pretty sure they've seen it, so they know where to find me, you know what I mean? So 100% they've seen it, but I haven't actually gone and talked to anybody in the UFC. I know Dana since I was a little bit younger, so he knows who I am for sure. So it's definitely a possibility.
Oh wow! So you and Dana have a relationship. I'm curious because the fight with Nate Diaz would be a huge one, but as we know, he's probably looking for some other bigger name opponents. If you didn't get Nate Diaz, would you be interested in fighting anyone from the Diaz camp, or maybe even someone else in the UFC? Has anyone else in the UFC caught your eye?
Anybody in the UFC really. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me. It wouldn't matter. So yeah, doesn't really matter. It could be Nate, it could be anybody. I just want to get in there and fight and prove that jiu-jitsu is still the main martial art in MMA.
Well, I mean, obviously you're a world-class grappler. A lot of people would picture you sort of coming in like, say, a Damian Maia and utilizing that skill mainly. But we haven't obviously seen, gotten a chance to see your stand-up before. Have you been working on your striking with Conor McGregor, John Kavanagh or Owen Roddy while in camp? And if you become an MMA fighter, would you consider sort of fighting out of SBG? And I'm just wondering, how would you sort of go in? Would it be to sort of incorporate all facets of MMA, or would you want to be like a Damian Maia and just focus on jiu-jitsu?
I mean, it's pretty obvious. I would obviously be a grappler and fight like Damian Maia. I mean, that's my strongest suit is jiu-jitsu, so I would use it to my advantage. But I mean, I really enjoy striking. I really enjoy boxing and kickboxing. So, I mean, I don't want to lay all the cards out yet, but when I get in there, it's I guess everybody will see what I've been working on and everything. So, I mean, I'm not a stupid guy either. I don't know why everybody's like, oh, you're gonna get killed and all this stuff. Obviously, I know what I'm doing, so there's no reason to think that I wouldn't be ready. If I got in there, I would be ready.
Dillon Danis with the secret weapons. Just curious, how long have you been doing striking, like boxing, kickboxing, and all stand-up?
Not too long. I mean, I've always done it on and off since I was younger, but I never actually gone like complete, like a long time doing it, you know what I mean? So I've been doing it on and off since I was younger, but obviously jiu-jitsu's been my main thing since I was a kid, and that's been my life. But I've been doing it on and off, but I'll be ready.
Just quickly, Dillon, I mean, you mentioned how you want to show everybody how jiu-jitsu's one of the strongest arts that you can use in mixed martial arts. Do you feel like that's lost a little bit? Do you feel like people aren't really, apart from guys like Damian Maia and a couple of select others, do you feel like that's a little bit lost in the sport today?
Yeah, 100%. I think it is. We need another guy to be like Royce Gracie and go out there and dominate everybody, kind of like Damian's doing right now. And I believe that it is possible. A lot of people like to say jiu-jitsu is dead and stuff like that, but that's not true. I think that it's the most effective and the best martial art there is for MMA. So I would prove that and make sure that jiu-jitsu still reigns.
Wow, exciting times. Now, the big focus is, of course, getting Conor ready for UFC 205. Just wondering, where do you sit on McGregor fighting Eddie Alvarez? Is this the fight that you think made the most sense for Conor? What did you think when you heard that announcement?
Yeah, I mean, that, for me, I have really no say in whatever Conor fights, but I would say it was the best fight for him, because that was his goal since he was young, is to be the two-weight world champion. So if opportunity presents itself, you go and take it. You don't let things pass like that. So, I mean, I think it's an awesome fight for him. You know, he knows what he's doing with his career. He's done the best career probably in UFC history. So he takes the right fights. He does what he has to do. And I think it's an amazing fight for him. I think he's going to be the two-weight world champion after November 12th. So that's all I'm thinking. I think Conor made the right decision. And he's going to do what he said since the beginning, which is he's going to replicate what he did in the last promotion, which was two-weight world champion. So he's going to go and do it.
Well, this fight will go down at 155. Owen Roddy said that lightweight is the best weight class for McGregor. Do you agree, and would you like to see McGregor stay at lightweight in the future?
Conor can really fight at any weight. We saw him fight at the 170. People don't realize how big Nate Diaz was in there. I said this before, that he's a big guy, super big guy. So, Conor could fight 155, 170, 145, 185. He does what he wants. He says it. He could do anything, really. So, I wouldn't count him out of any weight class. 155 is good for his body type, though, because he doesn't have to cut too much weight, and he's right around that weight all the time. So, yeah, it's a good weight class for him, I would say.
I want to ask you something, because obviously you're his training partner. You see him day in and day out. During his analysis of this upcoming fight, Faraz Zahabi said, "I personally think it's too quick of a turnaround because his last fight against Nate, he showed he has a lot to fix still. His cardio isn't bulletproof. His composure still isn't bulletproof. His ability to fight 5 rounds for me, I still think needs a lot of work and needs to be addressed, and I don't think he has the time to address that in this fight." Those are Faraz Zahabi's words. Just wondering, from the sort of perspective of the camp and yourself, is this a concern at all for you guys? And what do you think about the notion of the turnaround being too quick from Faraz?
That's just talk, but I don't think that doesn't make any sense, really, because he beat a guy that was a gritty veteran who's fought for the title. Nate Diaz is a legend in the sport. Obviously there's going to be some little things that you could kind of take away from that fight. Anybody that's fought Nate Diaz, they could say that they need to improve after. So, that was a war, but that's the way Nate fights, and Conor showed his composure. He showed heart in that fight. He showed everything, so the turnaround isn't quick. That's the way that we are. We just go fight, and then we go right back into it. This is Conor's life. So he doesn't need any downtime. He's been doing this since he was young, and it's just what he does. He goes out there and fights. He's the most active fighter on the roster. He takes fights a couple months at a time. So, this is just how he is. And I just think that's just someone's opinion. But I'm telling you, Conor will be ready for that day, and I promise you, he's going to come out winning. So.
Well, let's talk about the actual fight. A lot of people talking about Eddie Alvarez and what kind of game plan he's going to try and use when fighting McGregor. A lot of people trying to bring up the fact that McGregor was taken down by Chad Mendes, and there were some issues in the first Nate Diaz fight as well. Curious, what do you think about the theory that Eddie will try and capitalize on his wrestling and try and take McGregor down? How much of a concern is that for you? And do you believe McGregor will be able to stop that?
Yeah, but it's a long 25 minutes. It's the same thing as a Chad fight. And Conor can hit you from everywhere. He can hit you from bottom. He can hit you from anywhere, really, gets the fence. So it's a long 25 minutes. So I'm very, very confident in Conor to be able to pull this one off. So, if he tries to come in and wrestle, it's fine. We're prepared for anything. And Conor is going to be hitting him from everywhere. So it's a different game when you're trying to take someone down over and over again, and you're kind of panicking because obviously Conor's way better in the stand-up. So he's going to be panicking to take him down, and it's a tiring situation to be in. And when Conor's hitting you from everywhere, so I have a feeling that you won't be ready for that.
You obviously came in before the rematch with Nate Diaz for UFC 202. We didn't, and obviously Conor had great takedown defense in that fight. We didn't see it so much on the ground per se, but how much would you say, from your time training with Conor, how much would you say his jiu-jitsu has improved since the first Nate Diaz fight?
Yeah, so John Kavanaugh is his coach, who is a really good black belt, and he's a seasoned veteran in jiu-jitsu and fighting. He's a really, really good coach, and he's a really good black belt. So he always had good jiu-jitsu, and when I came in, we just worked a lot on positions and moves, and I kind of added my own style to it. It's kind of like adding a little bit to something that was already great. So whatever I came and helped, it's just a little bit of icing on the cake. I think that we work super hard on our jiu-jitsu, and I think it will show when he fights. So that's how I feel about it. It was just me adding to him. He was underrated, I feel, in his jiu-jitsu, but that's just people liking to talk a little shit about him because like a lot of people just want to hate. You know what I mean? So he showed that he has good jiu-jitsu before, and he'll definitely show it again. We work hard in that department. So I think when the fight comes, people will see if it even goes to the ground. But if it does, he'll definitely be prepared.
Just wondering, sort of to add to that, when you first stepped into the gym and you first rolled with him, what was your first impression of his jiu-jitsu game? Were you impressed with him?
Yeah, I was very impressed with him. I mean, the first time I came in there, he came at me really hard, so it was cool. Like at that time, we didn't really know each other. We were just trying to go at it, and it was good, man. He's super, super good athlete, and he knows what he's doing. Trust me, he's really good. He has a really good coach. He comes from a good team, and he definitely is really good on the ground. So it was good. The first time we trained, we went at each other, but it was cool.
What did you think of the rumors the other day about Conor apparently being knocked out in sparring? Did you get a good laugh out of that when you saw that online?
It was funny because it was actually his rest day. He wasn't even in the gym. That was just like that was a super rumor. Like, it came out of nowhere, and that really like didn't even happen at all. Like, not even like anything close to that happened. So I don't understand where that came from. You know? Like, it's crazy. That was completely fake. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. I guess like the people that report on this stuff need to check their sources.
Do you know by any chance who leaked that? Have you sort of gone around the camp and figured that out?
No one knows. I don't think it was someone actually in the camp. I think it was just some random guy pretending like he was or something. I have no clue. But I mean, it was completely fake.
Well, we had Owen Roddy give us a prediction a couple of weeks ago, but we want to get yours as well. How do you see this fight playing out UFC 205?
Said it before, and I said it again, that I think Conor's going to knock him out cold, so that's my prediction. I feel Conor will put him away 100%.
Do you think this happens early in the fight, or do you see it sort of happening a little bit later?
I could see it happening early in the fight, but Eddie's tough. He's good at kind of slowing the fight down, the same way he kind of fought Anthony Pettis, where he's just shooting in, but I feel like Conor will put him away either early or late. I feel like he'll definitely put him away for sure, though. Doesn't matter when.
Just wondering, obviously you were there for the UFC 202 fight, now here you are again. We spoke about the turnaround and it sort of being back-to-back. I'm wondering what it's like for you. What's sort of the grind like, and do you sort of feel almost like you're in a training camp because you're always constantly, training and being a training partner of McGregor's?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's a rough life, but this is kind of like the life I had since I was 15, is always training, competing, traveling. So it's like, I'm used to it, and you got to be able to know how to kind of control it all and take it all in and be able to compete and train with someone or help someone out for a fight, So it's definitely a kind of taxing lifestyle, but you got to just know how to kind of handle it and make sure you take it all in, It's a good experience for me, too, to be here in Ireland, and it's a cool thing.
Dillon, we appreciate your time. We have a couple more questions, then we'll let you go. We really appreciate your time. Yourself and Conor and the entire team at SBG have been working so hard and grinding away for so long with back-to-back fights and huge media tours. It seems like Conor will be taking some time away after UFC 205 to spend with his family. There are even some rumors that he'll be welcoming a baby into the world. How long do you think Conor will be away from active competition?
I honestly can't talk about that. I mean, that's his personal life, so you would have to ask him about that. But, Conor's a fighter, so he'll always be there to fight. But, you got to ask him about that. I can't talk about that. That's his personal life and stuff. But, so I'm not sure.
Well, the fans would kill us if we didn't ask. Let us ask you this, though, because there are rumors about him potentially retiring permanently. Fans are freaking out, not just in Ireland, but all over the world. Can we rule this out at least? Can you give us anything, Dillon?
You gotta ask him, man. I can't talk about that stuff. That's personal. But yeah, he will. I feel like he'll keep fighting. In my opinion, I don't know, but he's gonna go down as the best fighter probably in history. So he can do whatever he wants, really. But I see him fighting. I mean, he already said that he really wants to do the trilogy with Nate. I mean, he said that on record, so he probably does have that fight and stuff. But who knows? Maybe he wants to fight Mayweather. Stuff like that, there's a lot of options for him. That's a good thing about him, he has so many options.
Yeah, of course. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Now, once UFC 205 is over, fans will want to see what's next for Dillon. So what's your plan after Conor's next fight? What can we expect to see next?
Just competing in jiu-jitsu, probably the Pan Ams and then Worlds and big super fights. I always say that jiu-jitsu life is super tiring. It's always training and then competing like every weekend. That's how we jiu-jitsu guys do it. So just going back into the grind of competing every weekend and getting after it, trying to accomplish my goals.
Yeah, it's a hard, grinding life, but obviously you've got a lot to show for it. Finally, Dillon, last question. We know you're a New Jersey native. You'll be a big part of the major history-making moment at Madison Square Garden. Just curious, what's your favorite sort of MSG moment or memory that stands out in your head as you're about to head there in a month?
That's a tough question. MSG is literally 3 blocks, probably 4 blocks from my house.
Wow.
So, it's right in my, literally right next to my house. So it's going to be pretty cool to be there and watch probably the biggest fight in MMA history go there. Muhammad Ali's fought there. The Knicks play there. So there's so much history in that place. I think Michael Jackson's performed there. So, you can't really put Madison Square Garden in words. It's every kid's dream to kind of be able to be there or compete in there or something. So it's going to be cool to see my brother go to war. And, I'll be there for him. It'll be cool.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, what is that moment going to be like? It's one thing sort of living next door, and I imagine you've gone to see shows. What's that going to be like for you, sort of being the centerpiece? It's not like, you're in the opening prelims. You're going to be, part of the main event. What's that going to be like for you?
It's the same feeling, I can't really explain what it feels like. It's just like, kind of like the Nate Diaz fight. It's just like walking out there with him, because he's different than most fighters. He has like this kind of, he has like people he has a whole country behind him, So it's like a lot going into it, and it's a cool thing. It's the experience is you can't really talk, I can't explain it in words. You have to just be there and feel the energy and feel everything that's going on. It's really like an unbelievable feeling, and I know one day that I'm going to be there too. So it's cool to be there with him and like have his back and everything. And it motivates me to strive for stuff like that too. So I like it a lot.
Well, it's going to be a history-making moment at Madison Square Garden for UFC 205. We can't wait to be there ourselves and watch you make that walk. Guys, make sure to follow Dillon on Twitter and Instagram at Dillon Danis. Best of luck for UFC 205, Dillon, and thank you for joining us on the program. We'll see you over in New York. And, a big, big moment about to happen in November.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Demetrius Johnson, the UFC flyweight champion of the world, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a man of many, many talents. He is the #1 ranked UFC middleweight, a former UFC and Strikeforce champion, a skater, a surfer, a model, and now an entrepreneur. And he'll also be taking on Ronaldo Jacare Souza here in Melbourne, Australia on November 27th. Luke Rockhold, welcome back to Submission Radio. It's been a while. How's it going today?
It's going well. Got some jiu-jitsu day in. Now I'm cooking a little lunch, and I'm going to go back at it tonight with some drills, some boxing stuff.
Cooking a bit of a lunch. Well, I'm very excited to hear this, Luke. You know me and Casper, we like to eat. So tell us what's on the official menu for Luke Rockhold this afternoon.
This afternoon, we're having a little salmon salad and some sweet potato.
Oh, wow. And you're cooking this all by yourself?
I tend to cook a lot of my meals in training camp. That's when I get inspired to cook, because I know I can cook with the right stuff and make it tasty. So,
and are you watching those cooking shows? Like, sometimes one of my favorite things to do is when I'm dieting, I just like to watch cooking shows. I like to watch them create things. Are you one of those people? You watch a few cooking shows, see a few recipe books, and save up a few fun ideas for lunchtime?
You know what I like? I've been getting into. I just watched Chef's Table the other night. Netflix has got some heaters. That's where you want to go get your cooking stuff on.
Yeah.
I'm inquiring if this touches base to Melbourne and the people someone at Attica, trying to get a reservation for the week before I get out there.
Oh wow, that will be amazing.
Maybe we can work some out.
Maybe, yeah. Definitely not with us, because we're not welcome in Attica anymore after the last time. But you'll enjoy your meal.
Last time you went to Attica.
Yeah,
it was supposed to be the #1 restaurant in Australia, but I'm looking forward to that. I'm always down for a good meal. So, plus, I'm going to be in a week early, so I need to get a good meal in. Wouldn't be a bad spot.
Yeah, I mean, you've obviously got weight to make, so be careful with that week because a lot can happen. All of the great food in Melbourne. Just wondering, when you were here a few weeks ago, you put up a picture on Instagram of some street art and the caption "Restaurant hunting in Melbourne is real." What did you mean by that? Because you seem like a big foodie, Luke.
I just like the style of really of all Australia. I mean, even in Sydney, you find those done kind of. Go down a back alley and you find the nicest restaurant in town. They're just cool little avenues that you don't have in the States. Everything's so up front and it's all about the most proper placement in the front row center spot with the beautiful entrance and out there it's a different feel. I like it.
You go down the other back alley and you find something else. Now let's talk about Australia because it's a bloody long way away from the States. Well, me and Casper, we've lived here for a while, so we know where all the alleys are. What was your reaction like when you heard that you'd be fighting down here again? And was a part of you hoping that you'd be taking a much shorter flight to New York instead?
No, I was excited. I like fighting out in Australia. The good energy and I don't gotta wait around all day. I just get wake up in the morning and go fight in the afternoon, rather than having to fight at midnight anywhere else really. I'm happy to have a 5-round fight. New York would have been cool. It was a good stage, but a 3-round fight just doesn't tell the true tale of who the better fighter is. There's too much risk involved in, and if I'm going to fight one of the top guys, it's going to be in the main event. It's going to be in a 5-round fight.
We'll sort of talk about how this fight came together. Were you originally offered New York at one point because you did get a previous offer? Were you offered UFC 205?
Yes, I was. I was offered 205 in Yoel Romero, and I said, give me Yoel in 5 rounds. And they came back somehow with Jacare. I'm not sure how that well worked out. But I said, if I'm going to fight one of these guys, if any of them really, especially Yoel, the guy gets worse by the minute. By the second, I'm not going to do it in a 3-round fight with any of these guys, really. It's just, like I said, you have to rush the fight, and then you rely on, you lose a takedown, you rely on the judges and pushing it. It's just, a 5-round fight is a true fighter's fight. Yeah,
certainly. And it's going to be, like you mentioned, in the main event in a place where in Australia we fought before, but Melbourne, a different ballpark and a different place, a new adventure. Let's talk about the delay in you sort of deciding on this fight. We all know there were a few issues with contracts, and you were public about the fact that you weren't happy with the first offer that you were given. I mean, it just seems like right now in MMA, a lot of people are seeing that there's a few options. We saw Chael Sonnen. He shocked everyone by going over to Bellator and allegedly signing his biggest contract ever. Do you like this idea that fighters like you have set up this I guess, environment where other fighters are realizing, hey, the UFC isn't the only option. And if I don't like my offer, I can reject it, or I can maybe even go somewhere else.
There's another league. They have good money. That is an option for some people. For me, it's got to make sense. Dollars make sense. And so if the dollars aren't up to par, then what's the point? For me, I've put my time in this sport. I think I've earned my reputation, and I have a leg to stand on. When I fucking make a demand like that, my contract I had done up early on, and I was informed that I'd be taken care of if I held up my part of the bargain. I think signing that contract before Machida, beating a champion in Machida, and decisively putting him away and putting away Chris Weidman, making a hiccup in Bisping shouldn't set me back to where I was. And I had told him how I felt about it. And so we moved in a better direction, but I think we're still, I think there's still a lot of improvement.
Just wondering, are you surprised that this sort of got, let's not say sorted, because obviously you want to improve on certain things, but are you surprised the UFC came back to you so quickly? Because we've seen in the past where some fighters, they say, I don't like the contract. Al Iaquinta is a good example where he didn't like the contract, now he's off the card. Were you surprised that this somewhat got squared off pretty quickly?
They're going to play hardball with some people. Some people don't have a leg to stand on, I guess. surprisingly enough. So I know Weidman had his own issues too. A lot of people kind of followed in suit, I guess, after seeing what I did. Didn't work out for some of them. So it's just, I think it depends on knowing, what your worth is, knowing what you're capable of and how far you can push.
Mm-hmm. You've spoken about it in a couple of interviews about the fact that, okay, you're happy sort of with the deal that you got now for UFC Melbourne, but after this, you may want to renegotiate again and get a better deal once again. Is that the case, or are you happy just to stay on this new deal that the UFC provided you, of course, depending if you don't become champion again in your next fight?
It all depends on who I fight and what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I beat Jacare if that title fight isn't waiting for me at my doorstep. I'm sure we'll talk.
Is that something that you expect? Because when you were in Melbourne a few weeks ago, you talked about how if you beat Jacare, that's probably the biggest message that anybody can send in the division. Would you expect that would be next for you? Obviously, a title fight. And if it wasn't, how would you sort of react?
I expect that's going to happen. I don't expect anything else. I've already beaten everybody else. Beaten Bisping. I've beaten Weidman. I've beaten Jacare. And, I don't think I could decisively beat Weidman any better, really. And then Jacare, of course, we had a tough fight, but I go out there and put him away like I believe I'll do. I don't think there's anything left to say.
Mm-mm. Well, let's talk about this fight with Jacare. I mean, people are really excited down here in Melbourne, and we're so happy to have you on this card. It's really made the card special for a lot of people here. And Rod Laver Arena, by the way, for a lot of our international listeners, isn't Madison Square Garden, but to us, it's a very, very special place where a lot of great history-making moments happen. So we're very excited to have you headlining the first card here in Melbourne in Rod Laver Arena. After your loss to Bisping, what kind of changes and adjustments have you been making in training in preparation for this fight? And was it a case of correcting technique, or was it more of making mental adjustments so you've got the right mindset on fight night?
There's a little bit of everything, of course. I think the mental game is the key to this whole process, is not taking my opponent for granted, overstepping my boundaries, and entering a fight, without my biggest weapon. Was you can't do certain things in this game, and you got to respect the fight game. You got to respect your opponent, and so that's the biggest key right there, is just focusing on the basics, really, and going in there and fighting with everything I got. Other than that, of course, there's some cleanup I need to do. I was a little careless and in some areas and got away with some things, and so it's really just about being sharp, being reserved, playing my distance, and picking guys apart. And that's when I do that, none of these fools can compete.
Well, I mean, just mentioning Bisping, got to ask you, what did you think of his fight at UFC 204 against Dan Henderson last weekend?
Man, Dan surprised me. Dan came out of the gate hot, hung in there for the whole game, put Bisping down. I didn't see the whole fight. Tell you the truth, I was at a wedding and the Wi-Fi was pretty bad, and so it was in and out. It actually cut out like right after the first knockdown, and I missed the whole second round. So
oh wow,
I missed quite a bit of it. So I got to go back and watch it. But I don't know. Bisping's a tough bastard. He'll hang in there and point fight his way to the end. So it was a close fight. I don't know. I don't know what else to say, really. Bisping did his thing at the end, ran his mouth, and seems like he's running from quite a few of us, all the top guys, really trying to make this run and stretch this out as long as he can. Talking GSP and talking to all these other guys, it's, legitimize yourself and fight one of us.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned that. And by the way, we'll have to get your thoughts on the fight if you get a chance to rewatch it when we catch up with you in Melbourne when your fight goes down. But you mentioned this GSP fight, and I wanted to really ask you about this. I mean, you said that he's sort of trying to run from top competitors, but what did you think when you saw him sort of campaigning for that GSP fight before this UFC 204 fight went down? What went through your head when you saw him do that?
It just sounds like he's bitching out from wanting to fight the guys, from the top guys. I don't know. He's trying he's trying to run into any situation that seems it's going to be more favorable for him. I always thought the guy was tougher than he seems to be putting off now. I think he's just kind of, once he's got it. I mean, it's easy to go fight. It's easy to go fight when you got nothing to lose. When you got something to lose, that shows your true manhood. And now he's got something. Now he's running scared. So man up and fight the top dudes.
Are you glad that he won, though? I mean, obviously, Dan was your friend, and you spoke about how you'd be happy to see him get that, UFC title at the very end of his career, and it'd be a Cinderella story. But are you glad that Bisping's champion? Because now, assuming all goes well against Jacare, you've got that opportunity to settle the score and have that trilogy fight with Bisping?
As a friend, I was excited for Dan. I was pulling for him. 100%. I was on Dan's team for that one. Obviously, marketing side of things, you see, it's definitely beneficial that he's still on top for me. So that's the situation.
Well, he also spoke about how he believes he exposed your chin and that Jacare will knock you out. Even though you've said multiple times that you moved from UFC 199, does that rekindle that fire a little bit and give you extra motivation to beat Jacare, climb your way back up to a title shot against him, and potentially accomplish your goal of shutting him up?
I don't need him to talk anymore. I don't need any extra motivation. I know what I need to do and what I want, and I'm focused on Jacare, and then I will follow up with that one soon enough. I will finish this.
All right, well, you and Jacare, obviously a rematch that people have wanted to see for many years now. The first fight at Strikeforce was a great war. You guys don't have the same heated rivalry that obviously you and Bisping have. Just wondering, how would you describe your relationship with Jacare these days? Have you had much interaction with him over the years?
I think anytime you share the ring with a guy for 5 rounds and that close of a duel, you gain a respect for somebody. But as the fights get closer, you start to feel the pressure and you start to get up off your ass, when you don't want to, because this guy's trying to take it from you. So I'm starting to dislike Jacare by the second, by the day, by the week.
Yeah, but by the delicious gourmet lunch. Jacare spoke recently about how he believes that you're scared and that there's pressure on you to prove that you won the first fight. Do you feel like you need to prove anything regarding the first fight in Strikeforce?
I don't need to prove nothing. I've staked my claim in this game, and I will. People question you, of course, and they look at you. It's a very short memories in this sport. I've done a lot, and I have a lot more to do. So it doesn't matter what Jacare wants to run his mouth. I mean, he's got just as much to prove. So it's unfortunate for Jacare. Really, it is, because he's earned a title shot and he's earned his way to the top. But unfortunately, I'm the man in his way that's going to stop him from that once again. And I'm going to take it from him. I'm going to go get my belt back, and he's going to go back to the line.
That first fight, great fight. You beat Jacare after spending almost 19 months on the sidelines. How much, if at all, was that a factor on that night? And how much of a benefit do you think it'll be coming off, a much fresher version of yourself, only a 5-month turnaround time? And sort of how different, how much do you think you've evolved as a fighter since that fight?
I think there's a lot that went into that fight, a lot of nerves, and I was a kid. I was a kid when I fought Jacare, and he was in his prime, and so I've come a lot further than he has. I've grown technically. I went into that fight, like you said, 19 months off the shelf. My shoulder wasn't even healed, and then I put it on him, and I took that belt from him. So I'm much more prepared for this fight. I don't think Jacare is the same fighter I went up against, and I'm gonna break him down. He's still tough. He's still in there, but I've come a long, long ways, and he's soon to find out that we're a little different these days.
Last couple of questions, Luke. Really appreciate your time, and then we'll let you get to your lunch. We don't like to see food go cold. He talked about how this time your friends, the judges, won't be there. Obviously, he's an incredibly tough challenge, but is there any extra incentive for you to finish the fight and eliminate the judges so that there's no disputing who wins this fight?
That's why I requested a 5-round fight. I want time to finish any fight that I step in with. I don't want Jacare think you want to fight. It's the only one that's really I've had in my career where I've been decision and the guy even think that he got the better of me. So I'm ready. I'm just going to be reserved. I'm going to pick my shots and I'm going to put them. I believe I'm going to put them away. I'm seeing a third, fourth, potentially fifth round finish. I know he's tough, but I know what I'm capable of.
Well, there you go. UFC Fight Night 101. It's going to be happening on November 27th. I mean, assuming everything goes to plan, all goes well, Luke, you've said what you wanted. You expect that title shot on your doorstep. What's the ideal scenario for you? I mean, is there a time frame? Is there a place where you would ideally be fighting for the title? Obviously, Bisping fought in his hometown of Manchester against Dan Henderson. Is there anything like that you'd like? Maybe something near San Jose. What would you like? I
don't give a fuck. I'll fight the next week. I'll be ready to go right off the bat. Given I come out healthy, I'm looking to go straight into that next fight.
There you go. You have to be careful about what you say, Luke. You may end up fighting at 5 a.m. in Manchester if you don't play your cards right. But guys, make sure to follow.
There'd be nothing sweeter than going back to Manchester and 5 o'clock in his ass.
That's right. And then you can go find a nice restaurant down at the back alley at 7 a.m. But guys, make sure to follow Luke on Twitter at Luke Rockhold and Instagram. There's a lot of great stuff happening. UFC Fight Night 101, November 27th at the iconic Rod Laver Arena here in Melbourne. Luke, thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to seeing you down here in our hometown of Melbourne, making history at Rod Laver Arena.
Look forward to it. I'll see you guys then.
Hey guys, it's Stipe Miocic, UFC heavyweight champion, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, joining us back on Submission Radio is a close friend of the program who has been killing it with his awesome work with Fox Sports and the host of the great MMA debate with Matt Brown. Damon Martin, welcome back to Submission Radio. We've missed you, man.
I appreciate you guys having me. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys soon, I hope.
Well, it's official. We will be making a trip up there. They decided to include the boys. What are they thinking over there at the UFC? No doubt about Dave Shoulder leaving, possibly created some kind of gaping hole to let us through, so we will be there. But speaking of big events, I mean, there's a couple of things to talk about. We didn't have a show last week, Damon. A couple of things happened, a few personal things. They're all solved now, but we didn't get a chance to talk about this. So I want to kick it off with talking about UFC 204 and the main event, Bisping versus Hendo. There's a lot of debate about who won that fight. We never really got a chance to speak about it. And, of course, we'd love to hear your opinion. We'll kick it off with you first. What was your official, decision for that fight? And did you agree with Bisping winning it?
I didn't disagree with Bisping winning it, but the way I had it scored was 47-47. I had it a draw. I had Henderson winning round 1, 10-8. I think when you come that close to finishing a guy, I think you deserve a 10-8 round. I know 10-8 rounds are somehow like a weird disease that judges don't want to touch in this sport, which I don't understand. But I had round 1 scored as a 10-8 for Bisping. I had round 2 scored 10-9 for Dan Henderson. That one's a little closer because obviously Henderson was, Bisping was in control for pretty much the whole round, but then he did get dropped towards the end of the round, and it was a legitimate drop. It wasn't a slip or, just something crazy like that. He dropped him. And again, you get dropped in a round, I have a hard time scoring the round for you. And then rounds 3, 4, and 5, I scored for Michael Bisping, 10-9. Round 5 was a little closer. Dan Henderson went out there and got kind of a half a takedown. But again, it wasn't anything crazy. So I had it 47-47. A draw is actually the way I scored it. But I don't necessarily have a problem with Bisping winning. If you're going to make the first round 10-9, then my scorecard would have been 48-47 for Bisping as well.
Casper, what do you think? Do you agree with Damon? Or did you like the official scorecard? Give us your thoughts on the main event.
Yeah, I sort of agree, but I don't agree respectfully with Damon. I think Bisping won. I think pretty easily. Not to say that it was an easy fight for him, but just as far as the decision goes, I don't think there was any drama. I really like the 48-47, and I agree. Here's why. Round 1, Henderson, he did drop Bisping with the right hand. I definitely do not see it as a 10-8, and the reason is, even though Bisping does drop, and he does get dropped good, he is immediately, even as he's falling on the ground, he's putting his arms out, he's trying to land. So it's not like he was out. And then Dan Henderson sort of followed up with this massive right, completely missed. There's a great photo of it by Esther Lynn of him punching the ground. And he did land some shots afterwards, but the whole time Bisping was trying to, get up. He was sitting up. Dan Henderson would pull him down. It's not like he landed all that many punches. And then as soon as Bisping gets up, I mean, he doesn't even really look wobbly on his feet. So it's like, you look at, say, Czech Congo and Pat Barry, and those guys were, revived, 10 times each in that opening round. It wasn't like that. He was never out. So I really don't think Dan was that close to stopping the fight. He dropped Bisping. He had a really, really good position. Round 2, another close round. I think this is one of the closest rounds because you got Bisping dominating pretty much the whole round. He's, he's backing down up. He's landing a lot of good shots, a lot of kicks, a lot of punches to the head, and then right at the end he gets dropped. Again, he's completely, I guess, awake. He's completely conscious for the whole thing. And then, Dan didn't really land anything once he got on top. He landed one good punch and one elbow. Bisping on the bottom ends up actually throwing a lot of punches. Rounds 3 and 4, I definitely gave to Bisping. He outstruck Hendo. The 5th round, this was another super close round. Bisping comes out. Hendo comes out. He lands a few good knees to the head. And then Bisping lands some good kicks and then some punches. Hendo got that takedown, and he honestly didn't do anything with it. Literally did not land a single shot. Kind of just held Bisping there, and then Bisping, he landed that knee at the end, which wasn't the most damaging, but it was still a good, strike. Hendo, the last strike he ever threw was a front flip heel kick, didn't land, ended up on bottom. Bisping followed him to the ground and followed up with more punches. I think that counts more compared to Hendo's, takedown. So yeah, Bisping wins 48-47. I see zero controversy there whatsoever. What do you think, Dennis?
Well, you know what? That Rolling Thunder, I mean, I think it went differently in Dan Henderson's head, but it was quite a fun thing to see that as his last strike. Look, I'll be the ham in between the Damon Martin and Kasper Rosalowski sandwich. I think it could have been a draw. I can see how Bisping won. To me, it wasn't a clear win for Bisping. It was a pretty close fight. But I was happy to see Dan Henderson go out on this fight. I mean, there were aspects to this fight where I'm like, yeah, he's got the H-bomb. He's got some weapons. But you could just see he just clearly doesn't have the movement and all the weapons that he used to have. So it's nice to see him go out in a fight where it was competitive. It was against the world champion. And, he didn't get any huge brain damage and wasn't an embarrassing way to sort of finish out an amazing career. But Damon, the big question now is, I mean, we had Luke Rockhold on the program. We've got these 2 fights, Chris Weidman, Yoel Romero, Luke Rockhold, Jacare here in Melbourne. Who's getting the next title shot in your opinion? Is it already set in your mind that one of these, whoever wins one of these fights is going to get it? Or are you sort of going to stick around to wait to see who wins in the most dominant fashion and then sort of push that person for the next title shot?
I think it's more you kind of have to wait and see how these 2 fights play out. I think the most likely scenarios would be if either Chris Weidman or Jacare Souza won, and then you kind of have the argument of which one of them actually gets the shot. Because I think Chris Weidman and Michael Bisping have a bit of a rivalry. We've seen that go on through interviews recently. They've kind of called each other out, and I think there's a bit of a rivalry there that you could build a card around. And then obviously Jacare Souza, you could have argued he was probably the most likely number 1 contender until Dan Henderson got the title shot. That's not to discount Yoel Romero or Luke Rockhold. I just think with Romero coming off the drug suspension and Rockhold having just gotten knocked out by Bisping, maybe he has to get like one more win, unless he goes out there and just straight up murks Jacare Souza. I don't see that happening, but if that happens, I guess you could obviously put him in there. But I think it really comes down to one of those 2 guys. Whoever wins, if both Weidman and Jacare win, then I think it comes down to who wins more impressively.
I definitely think Weidman is up there as far as who will most likely get the title shot, but I think it's more between, in my opinion at least, I think it's more between Weidman and Rockhold, just from a timing perspective, and this is obviously assuming they both win. And if Weidman wins and Rockhold wins, I would definitely give the title shot to Rockhold. Obviously nothing to do with the fact that he was just on the show, but not only did he beat Weidman, but I just think it would be a crime if we didn't see the trilogy fight between Rockhold and Bisping. And I think what better way to do it than for the title? Run it back. It was, it wasn't a controversial fight. Rockhold got knocked out, but I think a lot of people were surprised by that. And in that post-fight press conference, people were talking about, you know what? Normally they're against immediate rematches, but these guys essentially sold the fight, and everybody's excited to see a trilogy fight with them. So I think what better time to do it than now? And if Bisping goes out, let's say Chris Weidman beats him, and to be honest, if any of these guys fought Bisping, be it Rockhold, Jacare, Weidman, or Romero, I would definitely be, picking pretty heavily to the other guys. I'd be picking against Bisping. So I think if Bisping loses, he may never hold the title. He may never be in sort of title contention again, and then you don't get that sort of trilogy fight anymore. So I think you got to strike while the iron's hot. Jacare is kind of in a funny position because he was on this great streak and he deserved it for a long time, and then he lost or controversially lost to Romero, whether you want to really call that a loss. Weidman, if he goes out and beats Romero, go on this massive, massive streak, I think that sends a huge statement. And if Romero wins, I mean, again, I think that's a great win against Romero, for Romero, but marketability-wise, I think the UFC will look at him and say, look, here's a guy who doesn't really speak or doesn't speak any English, not the most marketable, great fighter, but he also doesn't really look great in long fights. So I think Rockhold's sort of the clear favorite here and likely guy to get it if he wins.
Damon, I'm curious because after watching the Bisping performance against Henderson, I don't really want to see him fight GSP. To me, if he was to fight GSP, he would have to go in there, really destroy Dan Henderson, really show that he's at the top of his game. I don't think that, even though he won the fight against Henderson and he's super tough, I was a little bit disappointed by his performance. Do you still want to see, or did you ever want to see this Bisping GSP fight? Or after that performance and what happened in UFC 204, do you think it's just completely off the table now?
I never really wanted to see it to begin with. GSP is a natural welterweight. I mean, here's a guy who just recently said if he was going to move any weight classes, he would probably go to lightweight. So obviously he has no business going to 185. And if GSP is going to fight at 185, then I think he should finally have that fight with Anderson Silva before he would have the fight with Michael Bisping. So no, I don't really have a lot of interest. Bisping's performance didn't necessarily change my mind. I didn't really want to see it before. It didn't really make a lot of sense, especially when you have Weidman, Rockhold, Jacare, Romero, chomping at the bit to get a title shot. And it's not like any of those guys aren't marketable all of a sudden. So, no, I didn't really have a lot of interest in that. I think if GSP is going to fight for a title, it should be at 170, or if he wants to, make that move down to 155, I'm still not sure that I completely believe that he can make 155. That still seems like a pretty massive cut for GSP, but he says he could do it. So, I'd much rather see, GSP against, Eddie Alvarez or Conor McGregor at 155 than I really want to see GSP against, against Michael Bisping. If we're talking about, moving weight classes.
Yeah, and just to sort of add my 2 cents, we've spoken before about how I don't think Michael Bisping by any means is ducking anyone by calling out GSP. I know he's copping a lot of flack. I get it. His career is sort of closer to the end than it is to the start. He's trying to make as much money as possible. And to my knowledge, he sort of called out GSP before the fight. I think like if you were going to make the GSP fight, and if that's a big hypothetical, it would have been instead of Dan Henderson. But when you've got Dan Henderson ranked at number 13, getting a title shot, and people were up in arms, that's bad enough. Imagine a guy coming out of a 3-year retirement who has never, ever fought in the division. Meanwhile, like you mentioned, Damien, you've got killers just waiting in the division. Yeah, I definitely don't think it makes sense. I think GSP should either be fighting Lawler, Nick Diaz, or Anderson Silva. And to be honest, the way Bisping performed, nothing against him, but I don't think it's the fight that anybody's really clamoring for. But I understand him trying to make that money.
Yeah, it was an and people walked away with an interesting perspective of Bisping from the last fight. Obviously, he looked great against Anderson Silva, looked great against Luke Rockhold, but this fight, even though he won and he was tough, I think lost just a little bit of steam. Now, let's talk about Conor McGregor, guys, because we all saw this week that he got a $150,000 fine and 50 hours of community service imposed by the Nevada State Athletic Commission for the bottle throwing incident that, thank God, didn't take any lives, especially Damon Martin's or ourselves, since we were in the cross lines, in the firing lines, if you could say so yourself. Damon, McGregor now says that he doesn't really want to fight in Nevada again. Do you think this is an issue for Nevada, considering he is, well, the biggest name in MMA at the moment, one of the biggest names in combat sports?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an issue, and I think if he stands up to that for the next year or the next 9 months even, I think that says a lot, and that's going to send a strong message to Nevada. I think they're hearing it already. I mean, listen, the fine he got was ridiculous. I mean, let's just be honest. $150,000. Yes, it was a a terribly stupid thing to do, to start chucking bottles and cans at each other and all that stuff. But it was ultimately, it was just pre-fight stuff. We've seen it a million times. No punches were thrown. Nobody got tackled into the crowd. I mean, what John Jones and Daniel Cormier did was far, far worse, in my opinion, than what we saw to Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz. And let's not forget that the Nevada Attorney General, the guy who's kind of like the prosecutor in the case, suggested a $25,000 fine, and somehow the commission decided $150,000 was a better idea. $25,000 to me sounded fine. I mean, obviously, even that you could say is maybe a bit excessive, but $25K, okay, you crack it with that, and you say, don't do it again. Be out the door. It was an hour and 15-minute long meeting for this. I mean, it's just so stupid. And I think Conor, what Dana White said, and he was on Fox, he's absolutely right. Conor can fight anywhere, and people are going to go. I mean, New York is going to be huge, and that's actually a shorter travel for people from Ireland to come see Conor. He could go to Boston, and I guarantee you there'd be a massive, undertaking. People would be willing to travel from all over the place to go to Boston to see Conor McGregor. He could never fight in Vegas again, and that would never really affect Conor McGregor. So, yeah, Vegas and Nevada has to think about this, because with Floyd Mayweather gone, Conor McGregor is the biggest draw in combat sports. Don't let anyone kid you. He is the biggest draw in combat sports, period, right now. And they're going to feel the brunt of that if he just decides to avoid them from now on. Although I think eventually cooler heads will prevail. He'll end up going back to Vegas. There's a lot of other things that go on with fighting in Vegas, including no state taxes, which is a big deal coming out of the fighter's paycheck. That's another reason why fighting in Nevada is so nice. There's no state tax. So that's an extra, depending on how much state taxes are. I mean, you're talking, could be talking $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 on a paycheck that you're saving by fighting in Nevada. So there are other reasons. Wow. And so I think eventually Conor will go back there, but I think he is going to stick to his guns for a little while and just kind of make him feel it.
Casper, fair. And do you agree with Damon? I mean, Conor McGregor said this fine is more than most fighters get paid, which is true. Did they sort of overstep the boundaries here? And what would you like to see Conor McGregor do in his 50 hours of community service as well?
I think 50 hours on Submission Radio would be a good start. I mean, at least...
Come on, help the community, Conor.
Yeah, the Submission Radio community. Start at 50 hours, and then we'll go from there. Look, I'll sort of give my take on this whole situation. When we were there, obviously, it was kind of fun and enjoyable and fun to say that you were a part of it. But all in all, I really don't like that situation. Here's my take. With DC and John Jones, people always compare those two. Obviously, both were bad situations, but I feel like with DC and John Jones, yeah, you shouldn't be getting into a fight in public. I mean, that's essentially assault, but when you've got two trained fighters, I don't think it's, sort of hitting each other. They can at least theoretically defend themselves, right? But when you've got somebody throwing objects into the crowd, water bottles, not so bad. But when you've got something like a can and it could hit any person, I think in some ways it's worse, because at least if you're a pro fighter, you have some level of control and same as the person who you're, theoretically attacking. But if you're throwing cans in the crowd, you have zero control over what happens and who it hits and things like that. In saying that, like you said, Damon, the Attorney General's office, which is the Nevada State Athletic Commission's legal rep, suggested $25,000, and yet the Athletic Commission took it upon themselves to raise it $150,000 to $150,000. How do you get to that level? I mean, that is abuse of power. I understand that it's the percentage of their purse, but what if he made $1 billion? Would you be fining him millions of dollars? It's still, at the end of the day, throwing cans of bottles without victims, which is something important to point out. It's a different story if somebody did get hurt and something did happen, but it didn't. And so I think that's something that wasn't really taken into account. Not only $150,000, but also community service and the anti-bullying campaign. I mean, what else is he going to do? Does he have to wash Anthony Minell's car and rub Pat Lundvall's feet? I think it's too much. I think if you're going to give him something ridiculous like $150,000, do away with everything else. But it just seems like they piled on, a combination of punishments, and then they had that ridiculous, suggestion of media training for Conor. I mean, it's an isolated incident. Media training would just be a complete waste of time. And yeah, I'm curious to see what happens. You mentioned the state tax. I'm wondering if a guy like Conor would be willing to sort of pay that state tax and fight in other places, given that he earns literally millions of dollars, $80 or $70 or so, or $100,000. It might not be as much to, for him as to other fighters. And also Pat Wyman, who does great work, pointed out on Twitter whether or not the UFC would do as many shows in Vegas, seeing as the former Vegas-based owners in Zuffa, they're gone. And WME IMG is based out of New York. So I'm curious about that, and I'm curious what happens with Nate Diaz, because he's going to have his hearing, and you got to think, I mean, if they've kind of put themselves in a corner, said this is what we think is right, it wouldn't make sense for them to all of a sudden say, well, Nate Diaz, you guys started it, but we're just going to give you a $25,000 fine, right? He'll probably get the same, and I'm wondering if Nate will even pay that fine. Because this isn't a legal thing. It's not like he's going to jail if he doesn't pay it. If he doesn't pay it, he doesn't get a license to fight. And I'm wondering if Nate Diaz will say, you know what, I don't care. I've made my money. I've earned it. I'm not giving it away.
I'd like to see Conor McGregor adopt a highway in Nevada. You know, like Kramer and Seinfeld. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I just feel like a lot of people would visit it. It would almost be like a tourist site for Irish people coming down to Vegas. So, Damon, I don't know about you, but I think we should get on this Conor McGregor adopting a highway movement and to make sure it happens. Maybe make some T-shirts. That could be a fun thing. But yeah, it's just a ridiculous situation and another situation of abuse of power. But let's talk about some other big news this week. Ronda Rousey. Yes, she is coming back at UFC 207. Damon, you gave us a bit of a taste before, said that you believe it would be happening, and it is. She is fighting for the title against Amanda Nunes. A lot of people are wondering if she deserves to fight for the title after being brutally demolished by Holly Holm here in Melbourne. Damon, your thoughts. Do you think this fight makes sense for Ronda Rousey, even though she had to take a few months to learn how to eat an apple again?
I mean, listen, it makes sense in terms of this being the biggest women's fight you could put on, because Ronda Rousey is the biggest women's star. You know, did Conor McGregor necessarily deserve a rematch with Nate Diaz, considering that Nate Diaz took that fight on 10 days notice and tapped him out in the second round? I mean, yeah, he got beat up in the first round, but he still tapped him out in the second round. It wasn't like he lost a split decision. He got choked out. Did Conor really deserve Nate Diaz immediately after that? No, but why did they do it? Because it made millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. That word that you say, and I say it all the time myself, and I'm trying to strike it from my vocabulary, is the word deserves. Because deserves means nothing in MMA. I mean, let's just be honest. You know what I mean? People have gotten title shots off losses. People have gotten title shots moving weight classes. People have gotten title shots for whatever reason. And yes, ultimately, in a perfect world, the most deserving person would get the title shot. In this case, I guess you could argue it's probably Juliana Pena, but Juliana Pena and Amanda Nunes is probably at best a co-main event on a pay-per-view, if not probably, a Fox card or FS1, something of that level, because neither one of them are really big stars. Amanda Nunes versus Ronda Rousey is a headliner, and that thing's going to do probably 1 million pay-per-view buys easy with Ronda coming back. So the math makes sense. Listen, does it make sense in terms of wins and losses? No. Ronda got brutally knocked out, and if it was still Holly Holm, you could justify it a little bit more to say, okay, it's a rematch. We're giving Ronda the rematch with Holly, but Holly's no longer the champion. But again, it's Ronda Rousey. She's the star. She's the draw. They're going to give her the shot. And I'm telling you right now, this is going to be the biggest women's fight, since the last time Ronda Rousey fought. And that's kind of the point. That's why this is happening. It has nothing to do with deserves. It has to do with money, dollar signs, and Ronda's going to generate a lot more of those than Juliana, than Valentina Shevchenko, than anybody else could. And that's why this is happening.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And you got to feel bad for Pena, because she really hasn't done anything wrong. I mean, she's won the fights that she's been given. She won at UFC 200. She's been very vocal. She's been getting on any outlet, basically, that will have her and, talking mad trash about Ronda and really trying to sort of bring her personality through and be vocal. She really hasn't done anything wrong. But unfortunately, she's just not as known as, say, and Amanda Nunes, who she herself wasn't very known either, but she got a massive rub at UFC 200. Things really fell into place perfectly for her, and she ended up being in the main event, and that was the last sort of image that people remember from UFC 200, is her holding the belt up on a pay-per-view that was watched by, a lot of people. So she got the massive rub. Her star power, went up considerably, and then you've got Ronda Rousey, who's always been a star, and you talked about deserve. I think you have to factor in what Ronda Rousey did for the sport. I know that we've sort of moved on a little bit, and the women's division is now thriving, and then you've obviously got another women's division, but really, she's the reason why women are fighting the UFC today. So I think in some ways she does deserve that shot. And the UFC, they've never really cut that umbilical cord from Ronda Rousey. The division hasn't, always has, even in her absence, has always revolved around Ronda Rousey. It was just a case of when is she going to come back. But let's look at it realistically. You look at the other options, number 1 through to 5. If in the rankings, you've got Misha. What are the other options if not Amanda Nunes? Misha, I don't think people really want to see that fight unless it's for a title. Shevchenko, I mean, she's the woman who beat Holly. That's a terrible matchup for Ronda, and also she's not a draw. You got Holly Holm. I don't want to wait another year to see Ronda Rousey come back. And, if that were to happen, then you've just derailed Ronda Rousey as a cash cow. And then again, Pena, great fighter in so many ways, deserves it, but and theoretically that'd be a good, I think, warm-up fight for Rousey. I think she would beat Juliana Pena, but again, Pena's just not the name. And then who do you give the title shot to if Ronda Rousey is fighting Pena? You would have potentially a rematch of Shevchenko and Nunes, which again I don't think anyone's clamoring for. So this was always the fight to make.
Dana White was on Colin Cowherd and said Ronda's plan right now is to come back and try to win her title back, and if that happens, the Cyborg fight will definitely happen. I mean, can we believe him? Can we believe Dana? And what happens to Cyborg now while this Nunes-Rousey fight happens?
I think what is more likely to happen, and what I've heard in rumors of people I've talked to close to Ronda, is that she kind of has like a 3 or 4 fight plan for her career. I don't want to say that's it for her career, but I know this is kind of like her timeline. Her idea, from what I've heard, is to go out and obviously get back the title. That's number one of importance. She wants to avenge her loss to Holly Holm in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, Holly's off a couple tough losses, so I think if Ronda is the champion, Holly's got to go back out there and win a fight before she could get Rousey, but that rematch is still going to be big business. And then I think she wants to fight, Chris Cyborg. So I think it will happen. I think it will eventually happen, maybe at the very end of Ronda's career. And when I say that, that may not be that long away. We may be talking, a year or year and a half from now. But I think we will see it. But I don't think it's going to come until the very end. I don't think she's going to run towards a Chris Cyborg fight right away. Versus, going out there and, if she could avenge the loss to Holly Holm, she could win back the title, maybe win another fight against Shevchenko or Juliana Pena in the middle of that, rebuild her legacy, so to speak, and then you make the Cyborg fight again, and it's even bigger than it was before. I don't see anyone really beating Chris Cyborg in that time. Let her continue to go out there and fight. Maybe assign a couple 145 pounders to try to give her a matchup at 145. Just keep her busy. I don't see Cyborg losing. I think Cyborg has less of a chance of losing than Ronda Rousey does. So let them play it out, and then maybe next December we're talking about Ronda versus Cyborg, and it's the biggest pay-per-view of all time.
I know a lot of people sort of look at what Dana White says and sort of get excited about Cyborg and Ronda Rousey happening soon. I think you got to remember there's a few things that Dana said in the past, such as, when she got knocked out, that she was ready to come back after 193, and that didn't happen. That she'd be ready by UFC 200, and that didn't happen. That she'd be ready by UFC 205, and that didn't happen. So, I won't really believe any of this until I actually see them in the cage and the door is actually locked and the fight actually starts. I think with Ronda Rousey, she's... I don't buy into the notion that, she's scared of Cyborg or anything like that, but while Cyborg's always been pushing for this fight, it's very clear that she wants it. Ronda Rousey's always sort of accepted the fight with an asterisk, and, there's always been conditions to her accepting it. And I'm with you, Damon, where I think that Cyborg could be a good fight for Ronda at the very end of her career, because it's a tough fight and it's a fight that she'll potentially lose, but it's also a massive, massive payday to go out on, and I think that'd be good for her. I think what will be very telling when she comes back, if she does even engage Cyborg at all or really responds, will be what weight she wants the fight at, because she's always said she wants Cyborg to come down to 135. If she says, look, I'll fight you, I still want to fight you, I've always wanted to fight you, but it's got to be at 135, then we'll basically see that, look, the fight's not going to happen. Because anyone who's seen Cyborg's cut, and we've spoken about this last time, knows Cyborg will not make 135. If Ronda says, look, 140 or 145, she's actually happy to go up to that weight, then I think it's a bit more telling that, yeah, this fight is a lot closer to happening than ever before.
It's interesting because to me, if she loses to Nunes, I think that the Cyborg fight will happen, because I feel like she'll be sort of maybe closer to moving on to acting. But I think if she becomes champion, she'll probably just take on contenders in the division. She doesn't really need Cyborg to pull in the big pay-per-view dollars. And I mean, I think Cyborg needs her a lot more than she needs Cyborg. So, but again, with the weight, it's an interesting conundrum. So we have to talk about that. Let's quickly talk about Juliana Pena. I mean, we mentioned her just before, and She is the latest case of fighters unhappy with the UFC and threatening to leave. Now, this is, of course, when Ronda Rousey got her title shot with Nunes. Juliana came out and spoke. She is a big part of a list of fighters such as Jose Aldo, Ala Quinta, Khabib, who's fighting UFC 205, but has threatened not to let the UFC into Russia if he doesn't get the next title shot. Damon, what is going on with this trend of fighters speaking out about being unhappy with the UFC? Do you think it's going to keep growing, and what do you think about it?
Well, I think it's kind of a two-part thing. One, I think that, Conor McGregor putting his whole retirement thing out there, and then basically, they pulled him from UFC 200 and he still got what he ultimately wanted. Then UFC 202 ended up being even bigger than what UFC 200 was. You kind of see that power play a little bit and you kind of get inspired by that. You see someone taking a stand, you're like, okay, I'm going to take a stand too. But the downside of that is if you don't have the power, I think a guy like Jose Aldo has a little bit more power because he's the interim champion, longest reigning featherweight champion in history. Maybe not the biggest draw in the world, but he's a very respected guy. He's earned his stripes. He's a guy that, everyone looks up to and respects. And for him to come out and say, I'm going to retire because I didn't get what I wanted, you kind of take that serious with Juliana Pena. And I like Juliana very much. It has nothing to do with that, but she's just, she's still younger in the sport. Yes, she's 5-0 in the UFC or whatever, but she hasn't fought for a title yet. She hasn't been a champion. She has every right to be upset that she feels like she's getting passed over. But the problem is that her negotiating leverage, so to speak, is pretty minimal. She's not a massive draw. And, I assume she still has fights left on her contract. So, she can sit out and not fight Valentina Shevchenko or whatever the case may be. But, at the end of the day, does she really have the leverage to demand much of anything? And the problem is probably not. Even if she has 2 fights left on her deal, she's clearly not going to be leaving to go anywhere else. And what are her options? I mean, sit out and wait? There's just not a lot for her to do.
Yeah, I would agree. When you say she wouldn't be leaving to go anywhere else, what do you mean by that, Damon? You think that if she fights out her contract, she wouldn't move on to, say, a Bellator or somewhere else?
I think she mentioned Combate. She said Combate would pay her better money.
Well, that's assuming that she fights out her contract. That's the point. I mean, she had a chance to fight Shevchenko and she didn't take it. If she wanted to fight out her contract, she would have taken that fight and, one more. I don't know how many fights she has left on her deal. I don't know if it's 2 fights or 4 fights. But just like Jose Aldo, he wants to be released. But you and I both know they're not just going to release somebody free and clear. You're going to have to fight out your contract or you're going to sit and wait. And they're going to continue to extend your contract. And you're not going to fight anywhere else. I mean, that's just all there is to it.
Yeah, I agree with you as far as the leverage goes. And, Juliana Pena, she did mention Combate, and sort of she's high up there. She's been doing commentary there. I think if she did fight out a contract, though, and then Bellator came and said, hey, we'll give you a lot more money, a lot more guaranteed. You don't have to necessarily be the champion to earn more money here. I wouldn't be surprised if she took it. But like you mentioned, she has to fight out a contract. I think a lot of fighters, while they don't have leverage, they are looking forward to fighting out their contracts just so they can at least be free agents. And I think Bellator is kind of sitting there, licking their lips like, yes, there's a lot of people that are unhappy and things are unsettled in the UFC. And once these people are free, then they have obviously the freedom to pursue these fighters. And I think Bellator in a lot of ways is looking like the more attractive option for some people as long as they can fight out their contracts. And I think on the surface, we won't see too much change. I think most of these battles, the UFC will ultimately win, like we saw with Khabib. Khabib, put up a big stink, and like you mentioned, Dennis, now he's fighting UFC 205. I don't know what's going to happen with Al Quinta. He does have his real estate going for him. We may never see him fight again in the UFC, and, he's probably not going to come in and fight out his contract. But I think behind the scenes, what we're not seeing, I think a lot more fighters are placing calls to the Pro Fighters Association and inquiring behind the scenes and just finding out, what are the options? What can this fight association do for them? And I think that's one of the biggest things that we may not see for another few months or maybe a year. But, once these cards are, and if they are signed, that's when we may sort of see, a big change.
I'm curious, Damon, obviously new owners for the UFC. How do you think they handle the hardball with these fighters?
I don't know. I'm not really sure how deep in the negotiation guys like Ari Emanuel and Patrick Whitesell are getting into this. I think they're, really going to trust in Dana White, the guy who's been handling the business for this long, to kind of handle it. I mean, if they get involved, listen, Ari Emanuel's a master negotiator. That's what this guy has done for years for his clients, to get them more money and also to, sell something, so to speak. If he gets involved, obviously I think he's, they got to look at this as a return on their investment, and they're going to be curious, how does somebody how does somebody actually return that investment? Is a person like a Juliana Pena or Jose Aldo worth the money they're being paid? Are they worth more than they're being paid? And so listen, they're businessmen and they're smart businessmen. They've dealt with people making multi-millions of dollars for, throughout the entire time they've owned WME and IMG. So this is nothing new to them, really.
And I think just quickly, and I agree with what you're saying, Damon, just on how you mentioned how fighters don't have leverage in the UFC. I feel like in, say, a Bellator or another company, they would have leverage because while Ally Quinta or Juliana Pena, they may not be big stars in the UFC, for a Bellator, that would be a really good get. Someone like, say, Tim Kennedy, he may be sort of like a middle-of-the-road ranked middleweight in the UFC, but in Bellator, he's a guy that they could potentially make a star. So I feel like they have leverage, just not necessarily in the UFC.
It's an interesting situation as well because Chael Sonnen brought it up. Guys like Jose Aldo, guys like Khabib, and even Pena, because she's quite up there on the ladder, even though she's not a huge draw. They can come out and they can complain about the UFC. But when you have sort of lower to middle of the road guys complaining about it, and if you have a whole bunch of people complaining about it, it can sort of dilute what's going on. And I don't know. I'm really curious to see how the UFC is going to handle this. But guys, before we let this man go, this Damon Martin, we have to talk about something else, Damon. You're not only the man in MMA, but also the man in pop culture. Your website, Nerdcore Movement, is the place to be. People need to go check it out. There's been a few new shows out recently. I've been checking them out. You've got Westworld, you got Lethal Weapon. Give us your recommendations. What do people need to start watching now that a few new shows have kicked off?
I would highly, highly recommend Westworld. That's one of my favorite shows on TV right now. First 2 episodes have been fantastic. 3rd episode comes out soon. It's fantastic. It's a phenomenal show. I would highly recommend watching that show. Another show that's on the United States, I'm not sure if it's on in Australia yet, but a show called Designated Survivor with Kiefer Sutherland. I've really enjoyed that show actually quite a bit. So that's another one I would recommend checking out.
Wow, Kiefer's back, and he's in a good show. Wow, okay. Damon has no words to describe how good the show is, but you guys need to go check it out. Make sure to follow Damon on Twitter for all the goodness at Damon Martin. Make sure to check out nerdcoremovement.com. That's your website for movies, TV shows, and comic news. Damon, any hope with the second Jack Reacher movie coming out? Are you expecting anything from this?
I don't expect much because I didn't get much out of the first one. It was okay, but we'll see what the second one brings. So we'll see. That's the best thing I can say is we'll see.
Sacrilege. Okay. Dennis, you're with me, man. Back me up. You love Jack Reacher, right?
Look, I enjoyed, but I've got Tom Cruise. I don't enjoy him when it comes to things happening in life, but I do enjoy him when he jumps on the screen. So whenever he jumps on the screen, for me, it's always a fun time. And Damon, I'm going to admit it, man. I'm a real trash watcher. I love watching all those kinds of movies. Equalizer, John Wick. Put Denzel Washington.
Now, John Wick. Now that's a movie. John Wick is a great movie. That one I liked.
Well, there's a second one coming out as well. I don't know. The trailer's kind of looking a bit funny there. And also Power Rangers. Of course, we'll have to get you on to talk about that. Maybe we'll do a breakdown with Stephen Thompson and yourself. But a lot of stuff happening in the world of movie and TV. Make sure to check out Nerdcore Movement. Damon, thank you so much for coming onto the program. Now, Cass, before we finish up the show, I mean, we are back. It's been great to be back this week. But next week, there'll be a small break from Submission Radio. Of course, we'll be back the week after that and all the way through to UFC 205. So I guess just a quick shout out to our listeners. Next week, there won't be any kind of program, but you can expect a show the following week back to normal Submission Radio. But it's been a great show this week, hasn't it, Cass?
It's been a great show. I want to thank all our guests so much for taking the time. Obviously, Dillon Danis, Luke Rockhold, Joanna Jedrzejczyk, and the lovely man we're speaking to right now, officially dubbed The Dude, Damon Martin. And obviously, thanks to you guys for listening in. Check us out on Twitter and all social media at Submission AUS and Facebook.com/Submission Radio AU. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe. Obviously, if you haven't heard, if you've been having your head in the sand, we will be at UFC 205, and of course UFC Melbourne is just around the corner afterwards, so there is a ton of content coming to the channel. Till then, guys, we'll see you in a couple of weeks, and stay safe.